Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dynasty Dumbies. We're your hosts, Tony and Hunter, and it is an action packed conference championship week this week, and we have a lot to discuss. Starting off, we're going to go straight into the massive coaching carousel that has happened this past week with all the different coaching hires. Of course, starting off with the big one, Lane Kiffin being officially an LSU Tiger.
This was the domino that kind of seemed to knock everything else into place. Once Kiffin was brought in at Baton Rouge, everything else just seemed to fall in line. Over the past several days, we have seen a dozen coaching changes, hires, extensions that have really impacted the future outlook of some of these teams. Kiffin, obviously the biggest one with the dynamic that was going on between Ole Miss and LSU. He will not be coaching Ole Miss the rest of the season. He is fully on board with LSU. He was not permitted to continue coaching the Rebels, so that's going to be a huge loss for them as they look to make a run at this title.
We'll have to see if it's going to play a huge part in them in the playoffs. I mean, we know what the committee has said about it, where it is going to be a data point, but they don't really have anything to base it off of. So we're going to have to see, how much it'll affect them. But another team we're going to have to see how much it affects is, of course, my Green Wave with their head coach, John Sumrall, getting the move to Florida. And what I thought was a little surprising, because I thought for sure he was going to go to Auburn, because that seemed to be his dream job. But Florida is still, pretty good job to go to. But he is, unlike Lane Kiffin, he is being allowed to coach this weekend in the conference championships. And if they were to win and make the playoff, he is allowed to continue coaching in there as well. And it seems like it's very a respectful decision between the two, between the AD and him, where it's like, let's finish what you started. He's taken this team this far. They were in the running last year until the late season falter, and now this year still very much in it and control their own destiny. So we'll have to see if this coaching hired is a possible distraction to them.
I think it's really interesting to see the two different approaches with Lane Kiffin not being permitted to coach the rest of the season at Ole Miss, while Summerall and some of these other coaches we'll dive into here shortly are going to finish the season with their teams. And I think the difference really falls from these existing power conference coaches like Kiffin and the group of six like Summerall. I understand Ole Miss not wanting Kiffin to be around because Ole Miss has a good chance to retain most of the players on their current roster. So why let him fraternize with these players and convince them to come to LSU, while Summerall at Tulane, on the other hand, the harsh reality of the sport is that group of six rosters are going to have heavy turnover each and every year as the power conference teams look to pay these players to come to them. I think it makes sense for Tulane and these other group of six schools to let their coaches finish the job. You want to have that best shot at the title, and that's with your coach. And in my opinion, having them stay around isn't going to really affect the team. The team was already going to have massive turnover anyway with him leaving, so you might as well ride it out into the sunset.
I will say one thing that I have, absolutely gained even more respect for Sumrall is he was questioned about how he was handling commits with signing day coming up. And he said he told people that were already verbally committed to Tulane to sign to Tulane. He did not tell them that he was going to Florida or to sign to Florida if they were, weighing it based on the fact that he was going to be there. But he did tell those recruits, stay with your commitment, sign with Tulane. So, hats off to him for that. It's, not a lot of coaches would probably do that, especially with the portal and stuff nowadays where, like, oh, yeah, come over to me. But good for him being able to do that, to not, leave them too much in the dust there.
Yeah, and taking a look at some of these other SEC hires, defensive coordinator Pete Golding was promoted to the permanent head coach at Ole Miss, so he will be the leader at the helm for the rest of their playoff push, while USF's Alec Golish is off to Auburn. Ryan Silverfield from Memphis is to Arkansas, and then Will Stein is being hired at Kentucky after they fired their head coach Mark Stoops, who had about a 500 career record there since 2013. Some big moves coming from the SEC, and we'll see how this works out. And to me, it's a little ironic because the Power Four always say that they're above the group of six and that they're just playing a different sport. But when it comes down to it, they're constantly hiring group of six coaches and then constantly bringing in group of six players to fill out their roster and to compete. So for them to say that they're so much better than group of six teams, to me, is very laughable when most of the time, the same players from the group of 6 are playing in the Power 4 the very next year and are doing just as well. Take a look at JMU players at Indiana over the last 2 years. Indiana is one of the best teams in the country, and that 2023 JMU team had a lot to do with it, with their roster going over to Indiana.
It's crazy, like you'd said, that they consider themselves this upper echelon compared to the G6 when, there's so much turnover nowadays, like you had said, where half of them, usually end up leaving and going to these P4 teams because there's better opportunity, better money, obviously, and stuff, and they end up succeeding super well. I mean, look at Ole Miss's quarterback, Trinidad. He's at D2 last year. Mm-hmm. And this dude is now leading them to the playoffs. So it's like, goes to show, it doesn't matter, who's there and whatnot. You could have a 1-star player be better than the 5-star player, but we'll never know because they might not get that opportunity. But we'll have to see. And speaking of some more opportunity here, with more coaching changes, of course, moving over to the Big Ten. Of course, the big one for your Dukes is Bob Chesney taking the job at UCLA.
Yeah, this one was one we saw coming for a little while. We knew Bob was going to be leaving. I am a little surprised it's the UCLA job, quite frankly. I know there was a lot of interest from UCLA and Bob. He's from Pennsylvania. He's an East Coast guy, so I'm very interested to see how he does at UCLA. I hope he does well. He's a great coach. I think he has a good chance to turn that program around. It sucks for my Dukes. 2 years later, we're going to be looking to hire another coach, 5 coaches in the last 10 years. Haven't had a losing season in 23 seasons, though, so the process is the process. JMU is bigger than just one person, and I have confidence that we will find our next head coach and continue to have this level of success. Unlike Michigan State, who just fired their head coach, Jonathan Smith, to hire former Northwestern coach Pat Fitzgerald. A little controversial considering Fitzgerald's history, both on the field and outside of the locker room. We'll see how it works. Jonathan Smith, after coming over from Oregon State, just wasn't a fit, so we'll see how that goes. Another big Group of 5 coach heading to the power conferences, though, is North Texas's Eric Morris to Oklahoma State, where he will take over a program that really struggled this year. Just like Summerall, Morris and Bob Chesney are both going to be able to coach out the remainder of the seasons with their current program. So some more Group of 5 coaches staying in line right there. And I do just want to say, when it comes to how the Power 4 looks at the Group of 6, it is really frustrating when they're saying they're so high and mighty, but they always are coming and poaching players from the Group of 5, and they're, the SEC specifically are saying that they're such a better conference because they get all the best recruits. Well, you said it the best. Chambliss Trinidad, he just came over from a D2 school and is leading a top 7 team in the country now. Just because they're a high star recruit doesn't mean that they are the best players. You're looking at high schoolers and guessing how good they're going to be. Just because they get a high star then doesn't mean that they are a good or bad player. Anyone can develop into a great player at any level of the sport. So I really just want to emphasize that these ratings are arbitrary for high school recruits, and a lot of times they change depending on who they commit to. JMU, for example, just had a quarterback get an offer from Missouri who was committed to him, to JMU. He goes from a 3-star commit to a 4-star commit just because he gets the offer from Mizzou. So take the ratings with a grain of salt is all I'm saying.
Absolutely, all the time. I mean, it's random people making these rankings half the time anyway, so it doesn't really mean much until it translates to the field. So, but moving on with some more coach changing here with the ACC and Stanford hiring their former quarterback Tavita Pritchard, which I find very I think it's a great hire, honestly. He has his connections with Stanford. Andrew Luck is over there running the reins now, and Godspeed to him. It seems like he's really focused in on this and getting someone in the building that's familiar with the team, the program, and he's doesn't have that like end all be all stellar coaching experience, but he's familiar with everything and how it's going to run there. So I think this could be a great hire initially, and then we'll see if he can translate it onto the field. And I think he's got a pretty good shot because it seems like Andrew Luck is very keened in on getting this team back to where he had them.
I love the position Andrew Luck is in. He's a guy who really cares about Sanford football. So I do trust his judgment. We'll see how this works for him. I got high hopes for it as well. And looking at some of these group of 6 coaching changes, with Eric Morse leaving North Texas, the Mean Green are going to be bringing in Neil Brown, the former West Virginia and Troy head coach, who has been spending the past year as an offensive assistant on the Texas coaching staff. He is the new man at the helm for North Texas. They're getting a guy who's got 10 years of coaching experience. So really interested seeing what Neil Brown does. He was a really great guy. I really wanted him to win at WVU. It just didn't happen, and I think going back down to a smaller school might really benefit him, and he could have that kind of success like he had with Troy just a few years ago.
I think this could be a sneaky good hire, and it just didn't quite work out for him at West Virginia. Who knows? The circumstances just couldn't have been that great anyway. It was kind of in that weird transition of things in the college football landscape. So who knows? Like you said, I think maybe going down to that quote lower level is could be a thing in the right step for him. And North Texas, we've seen. I mean, they might not be your marquee landing spot, but this season proves that they're legit. They got a good facilities, a good place, so they could very much be in the running just about every single year now. Especially with how this season's gone, and still can go for them. But another great hire, in my opinion, is Oregon State hiring Bama co-offensive coordinator Jamarcus Shepard. I think this will be a good hire for them, going out of their way to go after someone who was somewhat highly touted, where you probably thought if he was going to go somewhere, it would have been to a G6 team or maybe a lower end P4, but his name was definitely on the market for quite a bit of other teams, and I think it's good for Oregon State to go out and just get him and get it over with.
I think it's a good hire as well. I like them being aggressive and going after and trying to get the guy they wanted here. So I hope Oregon State turns it around. It was a rough season for them, especially after Jonathan Smith had left his alma mater for Michigan State. So we'll see if the Beavers can get things done. And looking at some unfortunate firings, Tim Beck is out at Coastal Carolina, and so is Justin Wilcox from Cal. Those coaches had mixed results, to say the least, at those two schools. They have not filled the positions yet, so those are 2 openings to monitor for. And then looking here at some of the extensions, Mizzou did extend Eli Drinkwitz, Vandy extended Clark Lea, and the big one here, BYU retains Kalene Sitake, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Coach, after Crumble Cookie got involved to pay him a lucrative contract after it seemed like Penn State was trying to go after him there.
Yeah, I had seen the whole debacle of this storyline unfolding slowly on Twitter and other stuff of just, is he staying, is he going? BYU's having an emergency meeting and gathering up people at the churches and trying to figure stuff out, and what can they do to retain him. And I guess all it took was a man who made Crumble Cookie to get involved and maybe throw in some cash there as like a booster or something. But to get him re-signed there and extended is massive for BYU, although they're being kind of screwed over right now by the committee. But we'll get into that a little later. But it's good for them because that he has created that environment there, and they have that expectation now where we've seen that they can compete for the Big 12 just about every single year. And what they're doing right now with the team that they have is just fantastic on all levels. Again, shout out Bear Brockmeyer, true freshman, wearing number 47 as a quarterback, still blows my mind. But to have them sit at 11-1 and be an outside looking in, again, different topic, but that's a great season nonetheless. And maybe they can right some wrongs here in this upcoming championship week.
They have a good shot. They win, and you're in the playoff. And the team they are going to be facing, Texas Tech, also extended their head coach, Joey McGuire. I think that's a great extension for them. I think, though, the big question coming out of this coaching carousel is, what the hell is Penn State going to do? They fired their head coach early in the season to supposedly get a head start on this coaching hire, and they are still here without a head coach, and it almost feels like they've dropped the ball on this coaching cycle.
It's weird. I thought for sure that, especially this past weekend with it being the last week of the regular season, and, a lot of teams' seasons being quote unquote over before bowls and whatnot, I thought for sure I would have seen Penn State pop up with, oh, got a new coach. But we haven't, and it makes no sense because they were supposed to be one of the most marquee landing spots of this whole cycle. And obviously other spots opened up and whatnot, but still, Penn State is still a very good landing spot and should compete for the Big Ten every single year. And it seems like nothing's just coming to fruition. I mean, like you said earlier, they were in the running for BYU head coach Kalani Sitake, but it just fell through. I guess they just couldn't get it across the line when it seemed like it was almost done. And then he just went back to BYU and said, screw you, I'm staying here. And now it seems like they're just going to have to try and muster through and hopefully find a diamond in the rough.
It seems like they just thought that they were going to get one of these marquee guys to come there, and it has not worked out. I know they were trying to get Cignetti, and then Indiana quickly extended him. I really think they've dropped the ball here. They're in a tough spot. They're stuck behind the 8 ball. And maybe I'm a little biased, but I really think they fumbled with Bob Chesney, our head coach at JMU, our former head coach now. He's a Pennsylvania guy. He's a young, upcoming coach who has turned around and won at every program he's been at. He didn't turn around JMU, but he's turned around every other program he's been at, Assumption, Holy Cross. And he's a guy who knows the East Coast recruiting really well. And you give a guy like that the resources at Penn State. He's a young guy. Players love to play for him. I thought he was a really good hire. He wasn't going to be the splash hire that Penn State fans wanted, but the splash hire isn't always the best hire. And I thought Chesney would have just been a great hire for him. They just got out of this huge contract with James Franklin. They get to bring in a young head coach. They wouldn't have had to pay him nearly as much, and they dropped the ball on it. And maybe Chesney was really never one of their top targets, but I think he should have been. It's weird to see Penn State in this position, and I wonder if how they treated James Franklin has anything to do with how coaches are viewing them. They just watched a very successful head coach get fired in the middle of the season, and that could be a huge turnoff for potential new candidates.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm with you in the Chesney situation where I have seen multiple stuff that he was in the running, but I think it was just his decision ultimately. And so there had to have been something, behind the doors that we're not going to see or stuff's not going to get reported on because, like you said, for Chesney being a Pennsylvania guy, you would think Penn State would be one of those ones like, oh, sure, I got to go there. Like it's local, probably grew up around it or something like that, or knows the area, knows the college, knows everything. Like you said, already good with the recruits in that area. And for him to go to the other side of the country, I feel like that almost says a lot. Where you can't even get the local guy, and then they couldn't even get Matt Rule either, and then he gets extended at Nebraska, and so it's like I feel like there's something going on behind closed doors that we don't see yet, and maybe it'll come out later, but it's one of those things that's very much a head scratcher, and they are now probably about 10 steps behind in this coaching search when they really had the biggest head start out of everybody. So we'll have to wait and see what they do. Maybe something comes up once the season is officially over, or maybe, when the playoffs are into gear and a lot more teams' seasons are over. But it's going to be one to watch for sure because it's still, I think, one of those places that should be, one of those top teams that you would expect to be in the running.
I agree. Penn State's a school that can be competing in the playoff year in and year out. They have the resources. I think Penn State will be fine overall, but they got to figure out who they're going to have on the sidelines next year, or they are going to be in a very weird spot when it comes to recruits.
It's going to be crazy to watch and crazy to see. I mean, it's just crazy to think that it's gone this far and they still don't have a permanent head coach. So I don't know. We'll see. We've seen, some players, after their games with signs saying hire their interim as the full-time, but that usually doesn't turn out very well because, players love to leave. So we'll have to wait and see, but something we're not going to have to wait and see anymore is the latest playoff committee rankings came out tonight on Tuesday. And yet again, some crazy stuff, some not so crazy stuff. The typical sort of arguments are still going on from the same things. But some big notes here is there are now 3 G6 teams ranked by the committee. which is something I never thought I would see in my lifetime. I thought it was going to be just one until they finally decide. But, teams like a North Texas and JMU finally getting some respect, and deserved, where they finally slip in there to 25 and 24. And it's just about time we were starting to see more than one.
It's great to see my Dukes finally in the rankings. They've deserved it for weeks now. I don't care if you think I'm biased. They were a deserving team, just like North Texas was. So it's great to see the group of six get a little bit more respect, even if they are right at the tail end of it. More or less, the committee continuing that trend of seeming to kind of manufacture the rankings to lead to the results they want. But looking at the bracket here, obviously the big news coming out of the weekend was A&M's loss to Texas. So that put Texas Tech into the top four. So you have Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, and Texas Tech, all with the byes. And then rounding it out is Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Bama, and Notre Dame for the top 10. And then it gets a little bit finicky on who is going to get into this playoff. We have some teams sitting here on the outside. I think some teams that are for sure eliminated are Texas, Vanderbilt, Utah. I think they're all out. And then we have the other teams rounding out: USC, Arizona, Michigan, Houston, Georgia Tech, and Iowa. However, these last four spots are going to be up for grabs. I think the top 8 teams here, Ohio State through Oklahoma, are a lock for the playoff, though.
I would agree with you. I think it's pretty much set in stone that they're going to be there. Maybe some possible seeding changing between them depending on some results this weekend. But I think for the most part, they are absolutely a lock. But those last 4 spots, like you said, are definitely up for grabs still. Notre Dame, being the big one almost, again, with that conversation of the Miami head-to-head and the resumes when you look at them. BYU getting absolutely shafted here, where they're 11-1 and they're the first team out, is insane to me. And it just blows my mind that their only loss is to the now number 4 team in the country, and they're acting like it was some terrible team that they lost to, and it blows my mind that it's still happening. But one thing I thought was extremely interesting that the committee did was they just put conference champ 4 and 5. They're not like they don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, they have no clue what's going to happen, and obviously nobody does until all the results are finalized. But with the way things have gone, where you at least get how they had Miami as the ACC champ when we all knew that it was more than likely not going to happen. I mean, they needed everything. They needed help and more help on top of that to even have a chance. So it makes a little sense why they're doing it, but it also kind of just throw them in for shits and giggles. I mean, it doesn't really matter anyway, because the one that matters is on Sunday when they do Selection Sunday, where it's finalized. So it's just funny to me that they did that, where it's just they're not willing to commit. It's just like we don't know. Nobody knows yet, so we're just going to say 4 and 5 because all it takes is Alabama to lose, and BYU to possibly win, and then Duke wins. It just makes everything hell for them. They're going to have the worst Sunday possible, depending on some of these results. But that's just the beginning of it. I mean, there's so much more that could happen now with how things are falling with these rankings. But I'm with you where I think anything outside of Miami, I think everyone's just out. We've seen, obviously, I think the big one there is Vandy. They haven't moved at all. They get a big win against a somehow ranked Tennessee team who is finally gone, like Mizzou, and they don't get rewarded for it whatsoever. So it's like, okay, they definitely hit their ceiling. Texas was that team that everybody was, not everybody, but had probably the most traction that was saying they should be in, they should be in, they should be in, when we're both on record of saying no, they shouldn't be.
No. And
it would have probably been one of the biggest sort of robberies and just gimmies if a team like them gets in and a team like BYU doesn't.
I really hate the conversation of Texas is being punished for losing to Ohio State. No, the hell they aren't. They're being punished for losing to a shitty 4-8 Florida team. No disrespect, Florida. You guys no disrespect personally, you're being punished for losing to a 4-8 Florida team. And for all the people saying, oh, this is setting the precedent and you're not going to see these marquee matchups, okay, so be it. Because all I hear is wah, 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 wah. You're just crying because you can't get it the way you want. Every time an SEC team is left out, they want to move the goalposts so that they can get their teams in. Saying that you want to stop scheduling tough opponents is kind of bitch made, in my opinion. I don't agree with it at all. For the record, after Texas lost to Ohio State week 1, they stayed within the top 10 until they lost to Florida, which dropped them out of the rankings. So no, the loss to Ohio State is not punishing them. It's that loss to Florida that punished them so heavily. Yes, they have some of the best wins in the country, but they've also been one of the most wishy-washy teams in the whole league. At times they can compete with the best, but also at times they lose to Florida or they go to overtime with Mississippi State. Those aren't good teams, and you shouldn't be rewarded just because you beat some good teams doesn't mean that you deserve to be in the playoff, because your losses count just as much as your wins. The only reason Texas even has a chance is because of those great wins, and they are not going to be punished just because of this Ohio State loss. That, to me, is asinine.
It's absurd to think that their first thought is, we lost to Ohio State, that's the reason we're being punished so hard. When you look at the other losses and you're like, are you blind? Like, did you forget that you lost to a Florida team that was trash garbage this year? Like, does that just fly under the radar just because it's an SEC team? So they're like, oh yeah, it's an SEC team, so it's, the SEC is really deep and it's really tough.
Yeah, that just proves the SEC is deep, right?
Exactly, right? So it's like the fact that we're comparing apples to oranges here when you got the number 1 team in the country that you lose to week 1 and trying to say that when there's other stuff on your plate there, and it doesn't make any sense. And I know people are going to argue the same thing with Miami, where you beat a Notre Dame week 1, but there's other stuff on your plate. But comparing the two is just completely different, where when you look at Miami and Notre Dame as a whole, very similar resumes, the glaring head-to-head, and then you look at Texas to, someone like a Notre Dame or an Alabama, and you look at those, there's not that much similarity there to put them above those other teams when, they do have those good wins, but that glaring loss against Florida is what they should be looking at and being like, damn, this is what screwed us. Because, yeah, it is. I mean, to sit there and think that losing by 7 points week 1 to Ohio State is going to just destroy their playoff hopes makes no sense. It just makes no sense. And all I'm hearing is them coping or trying to find a way to cope and just like bitching about everything possible because they're not in there. And, especially Sark, where he's just like, it would be a disservice that if their team didn't make it. No, it would be a disservice if your team made it, because if your team made it, it's purely because of those 3 letters on your chest and not because of anything else.
I could not agree more. And I just think this narrative around the Ohio State loss hurting them is crazy. Texas is the highest ranked 3-loss team, probably because they did play Ohio State in the non-con. Oklahoma's the highest ranked 2-loss team. They played Michigan in non-con. And Ohio State's rated the highest undefeated team. They played Texas, like we've talked about. These teams are not being punished for non-conference scheduling. And Texas is not either. They lost to Ohio State. They stayed in the top 10 until they lost to a bad Florida team. That is the reason they're being punished. Unlike Miami, who seems to be being punished for 2. I think, personally, the teams they lost to, SMU and Louisville, they aren't bad teams. People keep saying that, oh, they've lost to 2 bad unranked teams. Unranked teams don't make you just because you're unranked doesn't mean you're a bad team. Plus, Louisville, for example, half their offense has been out for the second half of the season. So a lot of these losses they've suffered have been because they've been without their key players. And to say that Miami losing to 2 8-4 teams is bad, well, Notre Dame's best win comes against a 9-3 team. So that one loss separates a really good win from a really bad loss. Just doesn't make sense to me.
It really doesn't. And then, just going back to, yet again, Texas, where you look at the glaring loss of Florida, and then they get their chance to bounce back and, have that good chance. And albeit they beat a ranked Vandy, who was ranked 9 at the time, beat them by 3 points. Good win. Gets them right back up into that running again. I know after that win, we all kind of had them, I think just inside the top 15 or just out. And then the next week you lose by 25 to Georgia. It's like, okay, yep, there's the same team we've been seeing where kind of wishy-washy, like you said, back and forth. Don't know how good they are, don't know how bad they are. And it's just, again, then you just hark on it with the Miami games where they lose to unranked teams that were ranked at one point. I mean, SMU was just ranked last week, and then they slip up at the end. Louisville was in the AP for the longest time. I mean, they were in there almost half the season, and then they just stumble at the end. And it's just, again, it's about when you lose. We've seen just frequently thrown in our faces. When are you losing? Because that's going to play a part in it. Because it's not about who you lost to. It is, but it's when you lose. Because if you lose to that team and they're ranked at the time, but then later in the season they're unranked, it's going to be, lost to an unranked team. It's like, well, sure, if you want to look at it like that. But it's just so hard to tell because then you also look at the fact that, as soon as the playoff rankings kick in, the AP means nothing. But up until that's what they use as a metric. So it's like, why are we we're going to use one thing for the first 10 weeks, and then right after that we're just going to basically disregard it and only use it to further other people's
I don't
agendas.
think they should be ranking teams until week 9 because then you don't have any preseason biases. Texas benefited hugely from being rated number 1 preseason. That helped them a lot. Notre Dame's the biggest benefactor of being highly ranked at the start of the year. They were 0-2 and still in the top 20 because they had such a high preseason rank. So the rankings are so arbitrary. I hate looking at them, and it's so frustrating from that perspective.
It's never going to get any better, and we've seen that regardless of just how things are going, and a quote new committee, new chair, new everything, and again harking on the transparency of better explanations. Give us the details. I don't care. Like, I want to see the 25, but I want to see why they're the 25. I want to see why you have someone over someone. I want to see this stuff. It creates just a better environment, and teams can realize why they're being left out, and then possibly get better at it and be like, okay, if we're losing, or if we're not 10, if we're Miami and we're not 10 because of this, then we know this. So it's like, okay, now we know what we can do. And if it's something where it's like, it's because we lost to SMU, it's because we lost to Louisville, it's like, okay, now we just have to try and prove in the rest of our games, which they did, that they're a better team. And there's still not enough for it. So the simple reasoning behind stuff would solve a lot of issues out of this.
I agree. And Miami and Notre Dame specifically, these Final Four spots it's going to be tight. And I think the biggest thing that is going to fly under the radar is Alabama jumping Notre Dame in this week's rankings, which, maybe it would have made sense last week, but this week it just felt a little strange and a little manufactured. They said the reasoning was that, they had an early lead against Auburn, and then they held on against a tough rivalry and a gutsy 4th down call that was impressive. It all just seems arbitrary. They barely beat a not great Auburn team, but yet got to jump Notre Dame. Feels like it was a manufactured outcome because, as we both know, Alabama will be playing Georgia in the conference title game. Our rules, how we like to rank teams, is if you're in your conference championship game, you are not going to be punished if you lose it. You are rewarded for playing an extra game by being one of the best teams in your conference, so you should not be punished when a team like Notre Dame is going to be idle this week. But this sets up these Final Four spots to be really interesting because there's scenarios where, Notre Dame really wants Texas Tech to beat BYU. Because if BYU loses, right now BYU has to win to get in. They are on the outside looking in, unfortunately. That is their reality. If BYU beats Texas Tech, I think Notre Dame will be safe. However, if Texas Tech beats BYU, BYU is probably going to drop a little in the rankings, and that's going to put Miami and Notre Dame side by side. And that could be for the final playoff spot. And if you're telling me that they're going to have these two teams side by side and they pick Notre Dame over Miami despite that head-to-head, that's crazy. And it's one of those things over the last several weeks, it almost feels like they've course-corrected because Notre Dame was as high as, I believe, 8. Miami was all the way down at 18, and over the last several weeks, they've inched their way back up to be neck and neck with Notre Dame to be in a spot where they're going to be side by side, and I don't understand how they're not in front of Notre Dame right now. And one thing that the committee did say is they were very adamant on that just because a team doesn't play this week doesn't mean they can't shift in the rankings. So depending on these outcomes, you could see Notre Dame fall out of the playoff. And if I was a Notre Dame fan, I would be nervous.
Absolutely. They should be nervous because I would even go as far to say that if BYU wins, they could be knocked out because BYU is going to jump in and Texas Tech there's no way Texas Tech drops all the way out.
That's true.
So there's very much a scenario where when BYU win or lose, Notre Dame could be dropped out completely.
Yeah.
Regardless. And that just goes to show, again, the power of the conferences where because you're an independent and you're clinging on to that and relying on all these other people, it could have come back to bite them in the ass. And I'm definitely with you there. If it comes to the point where BYU loses and they drop even just one spot and switch with Miami and you have Miami at 11, Notre Dame at 10, there's no rhyme or reason for it to stay like that. It has to be switched. It has to be Miami making that jump up one spot and Notre Dame dropping out because to have them that close to each other in that same quote competitive pool. Exactly. I mean, it should already be the fact that they're in that same quote competitive pool that they like to use. That should come into play anyway, but I guess they're not close enough in that competitive pool, but they've slowly made their way. So I'd almost go as far to say that regardless, we could see Notre Dame just drop out completely, especially if I think if BYU wins, Notre Dame's done. They're out because they'll take that spot because they'll jump up and someone's got to drop down. And who knows, if Alabama loses, they could also drop down as well, and that could push Miami up in there as well. So we'll have to see. They were very adamant that they are going to re-rank all 25 after the games. They weren't answering about stuff, which, again, good answer, good way to duck stuff. But they were very adamant that they are going to re-rank after the games, and we will see where it goes from there.
You know, I think we can all agree the top 8's locked. Personally, I think even if Alabama loses, they're a lock for the playoff. They'll be the 3-loss team that sneaks in, unless if they get absolutely smoked by Georgia. I don't see them punishing Alabama for losing the conference title game. They didn't punish SMU last year. I don't think it makes sense for punishing a team for being good enough to play an extra game. And quite frankly, Notre Dame and Miami could be the last two teams out. If you have these top 9 teams all as a lock and BYU wins, that's 10 teams. And then you're going to have the last two conference champions, which could be UVA, Tulane, JMU, or if we get real crazy, a Duke or UNLV or Boise State. Notre Dame and Miami are the first two teams out. So both Notre Dame and Miami, in my opinion, really want BYU to lose because they do not want two Big 12 teams in there. And if BYU loses, I really think Notre Dame's in a tough spot.
I think regardless, Notre Dame's in a tough spot because, again, outside looking in with these conferences where they got to rely on some stuff to happen. You know, if one game goes wrong, they could be just completely knocked out. But it's gonna be insane. I mean, and to say that's not even the most insane thing. I think the most insane thing is these last two spots.
Yeah,
where these last two conference champions, like where we said didn't even put them in. They just said conference champion 4, conference champion 5, because it comes down to if UVA wins, they're in. Simple as that. If Duke wins, that's when chaos ensues.
Oh, and do I want the chaos?
With the committee finally ranking North Texas 1, that all but guarantees that the winner of the American is in. regardless of
With
what else
them
happens.
ranking
The winner of the
North
American-
Texas above JMU.
above JMU
Yes.
as well. Yes, that all but guarantees that the between Tulane and North Texas, one of those two teams is in the playoff. Done and dusted, whatever. Then it gets crazier to the fact that if Duke wins, that's when you're looking at JMU being ranked already. If they win the Sun Belt, and if Duke wins, that puts JMU as that fifth conference champion, more than likely. I would 99% sure that's how it would turn out. I don't think a Duke win, unless it was by 50 points, I don't think a Duke win would be enough to just throw them into that 12 spot out of nowhere.
Knocking on wood. Knocking on wood before I say this. I don't know if you could hear it, but I'm knocking on
Yes.
wood. Should JMU win and Duke win, I think it almost guarantees JMU a spot because we are ranked right now. If they somehow do the mental gymnastics of putting a 8-5 Duke team ahead of a 12-1 JMU team, you might never see me publicly show my face again, because that will be the most insane math bending skills I have ever seen to put a team like that in front of JMU. Props to Duke if they get it done. I am the biggest Duke fan this weekend. I really am. I truly am. But I don't think a win gets them ahead of JMU, who could finish 12-1.
I'm with you there. I don't think any sort of win is enough for them. I mean, you could argue stupid resumes and numbers, but when you look at it, to have a 5-loss team in the playoff would ruin all the integrity they've been trying to build, even though there really isn't a lot anyway. But it would ruin everything, especially imagine your SEC fanboys if a 5-loss team was in there and a 3-loss Texas gets left out. It would be absurd, and we all know that the committee's not going to do that, at least we would think. So I'm with you where this all but guarantees JMU would be in as that 12 seed more than likely. If Duke is to win and JMU takes care of business as well, we're going to have to wait and see because all the games will be done by Saturday night.
Yep.
But the situations that could come from Duke winning is crazy because that even, there's even more that could come from that if JMU loses somehow. Then you bring in the Mountain West.
Don't even say it, Tony. Don't say it.
The winner of that could find a way to sneak in. There's just so many crazy things that could go on. But it could all just be simply finished off if UVA were just to win. Then they would get in as that 11 seed, and the winner of Tulane North Texas would get in as that 12.
Unfortunately, that is the reality for JMU. We do not control our own destiny. And like you mentioned, the Mountain West isn't out of it either. UNLV is sitting there at 10-2. I know Boise's 8-4. I think that even if they win, they're probably out. But if UNLV beats Boise State in the Mountain West, Troy beats JMU, and Duke beats UVA, there's a really good chance that an 11-2 UNLV team is the last seed in over a 5-loss Duke team. And me personally, I would put UNLV in front of Duke. Boise, if they beat UNLV and finish 9-4 and Duke finishes 8-5, there's going to be a really big conversation of who gets in between those two teams. I apologize to Kennesaw State. I think even if they win, they are not getting in ahead of Duke or Boise. But there's a lot of nothing is set in stone with these Final Four spots. There is an endless combination of teams that could theoretically get in here between Alabama, Notre Dame, BYU, Miami, UVA, the American, JMU, and even the Mountain West.
It's going to be crazy, and I'm so looking forward to Sunday when they have to make these decisions because it's just going to be absolute cinema. So we'll have to wait and see. But some other thoughts here with Ole Miss making the jump despite Lane Kiffin leaving, I thought was a little interesting. I mean, you can't really punish them too hard because like we had said and they have said before, there's no data point to go based off of. We don't know what that team looks like without him. So it's really hard to punish him hard enough to where should they drop? I don't think so. I mean, if we had gotten that last game without him in the Egg Bowl where he didn't coach and we saw that they were significantly worse, then yeah, they probably would have dropped further or just dropped in general. But getting that jump up, I think it is pretty big, especially when it comes to these first round games where you're hosting. So we'll have to see if it stays like that. Depending on some of these games, they could end up dropping again. But another key or interesting thing here is we have 2 rematches in round 1 with the way the bracket is right now, obviously subject to change. But Bama and OU playing again. This time OU would be hosting, and then Notre Dame and A&M would be playing yet again. So possibly a Notre Dame right in their wrong sort of thing. But that's if they get in. So.
I really think the Ole Miss situation is interesting. Obviously, a couple years ago, Florida State got absolutely shafted for the Jordan Travis injury. Totally unfair. I think any sane person agreed that was wrong. And I'm glad that they're not doing the same thing to Ole Miss here. Although the SEC hater in me wishes they were. They at Ole Miss, the players do not deserve to be punished for that. You should be judged based off of the performances you put on the field. Doesn't matter if you lose someone, you still should be rewarded. And I'm surprised to see them jump, but I'm glad to see that they weren't knocked out of the playoff or punished unfairly for something that the players have no say in.
It would be a shame for a lot of those players, seniors, people who that could be their last football game ever, where because one single person left, that their season is just thrown away and means absolutely nothing after everything they've worked for, where they were very much still in the running for the SEC title game till that last game there in the Alabama-Auburn game. But nonetheless, it hasn't done anything to them, but except apparently move them up spot. So maybe other teams getting rid of their coach could move them up a spot.
Tulane jumped up 4, so...
Exactly. So
JMU and North Texas
JMU
got
gets
ranked.
So. Exactly. So it seems like that's the formula right now: is get rid of your coach and you move up. So maybe some other teams might follow suit. But nonetheless, that's just how things are going right now. We have a whole lot to look forward to. But then now jumping into, of course, the Dynasty Dummy rankings with how we foresee it, and nothing too crazy on our end. A lot of stuff remaining about the same again, but this one we only had 4 ballots out of 5 because Mr. Land Nav Blitz could not do his. He just simply doesn't have the time. Not going to blame him too much, but nothing too crazy. A few movements here and there, mostly from our last 2 champs in now, with Miami getting that at-large for us, sneaking into that 10 spot, and UVA being the conference champ, going into the 12 seed. JMU, despite being 13, still that conference champ at 11. Our top 6 staying relatively the same. We have some teams that are tied, a lot of teams that are tied, purely because of not having that 5th ballot. Oregon and Georgia tied for 4th. Oregon getting that jump because of they're the highest ranked. Miami and Oklahoma being tied. JMU, Alabama being tied as well. North Texas and Tulane being tied. Arizona and USC being tied right below them. And then our 25 spot being Kennesaw State is tied with Georgia Tech, despite Georgia Tech being on everybody's ballot and Kennesaw State being on 1. So it's pretty funny nonetheless. But hey, I mean, I respect Kennesaw State. The season that they've had is
really impressive.
It's very impressive because this is their 2nd year in the FBS, and they've already had this massive turnaround where it's just like they were bottom barrel, barely alive team, and now they're, you could say in the hunt for the playoff, but we doubt it. But you could say it.
Never say never.
You never say never. You never know. But got to give them their flowers. I was very close to ranking them as well. I know Will was the one who put them at 23. I thought about it. I was having a lot of issues with my last 2 or 3 spots, and I just ended up going with Michigan, Georgia Tech to round out my 24 and 25.
I did not consider Kennesaw State, I will admit. But I did have Navy and UNLV join, so plenty of Group of 5 love from me. I'm just not a believer in Kennesaw State in that matter. Great team, though. Great season. Would be awesome for them to finish it off against Jack State, another up-and-coming team that just joined the FBS ranks. But, taking a look at our bracket here, the biggest difference is obviously in how we're looking. I think, in these Final Four spots with Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Alabama sitting on the outside for us. I think Alabama, just because of their losses to Oklahoma, is sitting behind them, and Oklahoma being that first team out with JMU and UVA taking those spots. And obviously those last 2 spots, conference champions, subject to change. Should the Dukes lose, then, you'll see us have the American champion. And clearly, even Tony, the Tulane fan, has JMU ranked ahead of Tulane and North Texas, for the record. So it will take... this can be taken with a grain of salt. Obviously, a lot of changes could come with UVA, JMU, the conference championships. With Alabama, they get a shot to get the auto bid from us, obviously, and still sneak into the playoff. I think it's safe to say Notre Dame and Oklahoma are going to be officially eliminated no matter what happens for us. Even if JMU and UVA were to lose, they would be replaced by North Texas, and then, if Kennesaw State wins, I guess Kennesaw State. So it would be a crazy, crazy whirlwind for us. Bama also has a chance to knock Miami out of ours as well. If JMU and UVA win, Bama can knock Miami out. So a lot of change. I think our bracket is, it's fairly similar. I think another big one, though, is BYU is ranked very highly by us. They should be, in my opinion. There, as much as the conversation is about Miami and Notre Dame, it is overshadowing how hard BYU is getting screwed by the committee. An 11-1 team, their only loss is to a top 4 win with multiple top 25 wins, a strong strength of record. It's very disappointing to see them be in this position by the committee. But if it was up to us, they're safe.
It's funny because I saw, right before we started this, I saw a tweet, and it was comparing Alabama's resume to BYU's resume, and BYU's was better. Simple as the fact, going by the stuff that they usually use when they have one thing that I saw in there was they both played a sub 500 ACC school. Alabama lost by 14. BYU won by, I think, 3 possessions. So that was one metric. The ranked wins over current ranked, the ranked wins against, or not the ranked wins, the wins against bowl eligible teams and stuff like that. BYU beat them on every metric. So I'm really finding it hard to understand what's holding them back in comparison to a team like an Alabama and even a Notre Dame.
I'll tell you what's holding them back.
Eyes,
they got Big 12 up on their shoulder and not SEC.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So we all know that's the actual reason, and they just don't like Mormons. So we'll have to, it's a shame that it's come to the point for BYU where it's win and you're in, lose and you're done. You're out of it. And it really sucks to see that for a team like them where it's like they're not your typical,
I think they got screwed last year too, that it wasn't talked about enough. They were 10-2. They started off the year, I believe it was 9-0 or 8-0, and they stumbled a couple times down the stretch to good teams, one of them being Arizona State. And they had beat SMU head-to-head, and SMU was in front of them. We could see back-to-back years Miami and BYU get screwed over by the committee here, and it's crazy to think about.
It's becoming a thing of they just like to screw over Mormons and the convicts. So I don't know. It's something with, I don't know if it's just the logo on their chest or if it's the name or if it's whatever it is, but something needs to be looked at here because for an 11-1 team like a BYU in a P4 is crazy to think that they wouldn't be inside that top 10. And I think we have them realistically ranked where they're inside that top 10. Cody having them at 5, the highest that they're ranked is 5 right now, which you could argue that too. They can absolutely be ranked that high. Me and you have them below Georgia and Oregon, so very interchangeable there. So it's again one of those things where it's a head scratcher. Don't really understand it, but in our eyes, it's very obvious that they are a deserving team.
And we feel the same way about Utah. I think there is a good argument for Utah maybe being a little overranked by us instead of maybe an Oklahoma being in there ahead of them. But we feel really good about Utah as a team. So I like our rankings. I think it's really interesting comparing them to the committee. And ultimately, we'll find out Sunday of what the reality is.
It's going to be so fun to watch. I'm so looking forward to these games starting on Friday. They're just going to be so entertaining. Like it feels like this year there's so much more at stake, and so much could change in the matter of 4 quarters. So it just this one feels a lot more exciting than years prior with how things are going. But we'll have to see. And one thing we will see is, of course, our teams playing this weekend, both of them being on Friday, with Tulane hosting North Texas, despite North Texas having a better record, because the first tiebreaker in the American Conference is the playoff rankings, who is ranked the highest, and Tulane now being number 20 in the playoff rankings, while North Texas snuck in at 24. So Tulane gets that tiebreaker. They get to host this Friday, 8 p.m., possible boots on ground. We'll see. Little sneak peek there. This is the 4th straight conference championship game appearance for Tulane, which is very impressive in my opinion. Having two coaches in that span, where who is it? I'm blanking on his name. Willie Fritz, who is now at Houston, leading them to their marquee season, and that 2022 season was the last time they won the American, where they beat UCF and then won the Cotton Bowl against Caleb Williams' USC. So looking for them to finally get over that hump there with Summerall after last year, the kind of faltering there at the end, losing the chance to host, and then going to Army and losing. We are underdogs at home, which is not surprising to me, honestly. North Texas is still a very good team, and they have done a lot of great things this year. And there's been, very ups and downs for Tulane this year, so I'm not too surprised by that, but I love it. I love the underdog mentality. I'm sure Summerall is absolutely digging that into the team's brain right now. But a key point in this, like we had hit earlier, is both the team's coaches are out the door. So are they going to be 100% in on this? And it's going to be interesting to see. You might be able to see who's taking it a little more serious, who actually cares about it, and who's just like, I'm here because I got a coach, and not thinking about what their team's going to do, next week when they go to their new teams full time. So it's going to be interesting to see which coach is fully bought in and which is kind of half-assing it possibly.
Yeah,
But
I know if I was a Tulane fan and I saw my head coach getting off the plane doing the gator chomp while he should be focusing on the game upcoming, that wouldn't make me feel too happy.
I wouldn't say I'm overly confident about this, but who's to say that, North Texas isn't thinking the same thing with their coach being gone and how things are going. They announced theirs was announced earlier. It wasn't this past weekend, so maybe the butterflies of that are already gone. But one thing I'm highlighting here is the Tulane defense against Drew Mestamaker. That dude is a certified baller at quarterback, and he has just absolutely killed it through the air. So being able to contain that, make him make those mistakes. We've seen in the game that they lost, he made a lot of mistakes, 4 interceptions, I believe. So if you can get in his head early, make him overplay in that sense, that could lead to a lot of successful things. And of course, like I've been harking on, is finish the drives. You need points in any sort of game, but this one specifically, get the points when you can. 7's better than 3, 3's better than 0. You got to leave with points at all costs, because those 3 points usually end up biting you in the butt in a lot of situations, or if it's lost by double digits, maybe it didn't matter, who knows. But I'm all for taking points. If there's the risk of there's situational stuff where you can go for it on 4th, but it's very situational in my opinion, where when is it worth it, when is it not worth it. So that's on Summerall to decide. He's gone for it a lot this year, A lot of it has come back to bite him in the butt, but still going to be fine. I think it'll be all right. I think it'll be a fantastic game, and we've already seen with how the committee has ranked them. The winner of this game is 100% going to the playoff, where they will more than likely, they will be traveling to someone, and they'll either be the 11th seed or the 12th seed, so that could change quite a bit as well.
I think that this is going to be an incredible game Friday night. I hope you can get some boots on grounds to it because it's going to be a fun game. I think these two teams are going to be playing their hearts out, knowing that, this is almost a last rodeo. Just like it is going to be for my JMU Dukes when they host Troy Friday night. I will be on the confirmed boots on the ground for that game. It's going to be below freezing, snow flurries at kickoff. Them boys from Alabama are going to be in for a rude awakening when they kick that ball off, and it is freezing out, and you have 26,000 crazy JMU fans screaming at you. One thing that I do want to note, and I don't know if this is true for the American, I assume it is, but for the Sun Belt, it has to be treated as a neutral site game. So JMU gets home stadium, home field advantage, the home crowd. However, a neutral site game dictates that the JMU PA announcer can't be biased towards JMU. You're not going to hear any big "it's third down" sort of calls from the booth. You're not going to see favorable highlights shown on the Jumbotron. JMU's Marching Royal Dukes aren't going to be playing after every first down. It's up to the fans to bring the energy on their own. You're not going to have the assistance, and I know JMU is going to be able to do it. And this is a chance to claim our first official Sunbite title after the 2022 and 2023 snubs we faced when we were ineligible, yet we were the best team in the East, and I think the best team in the Sun Belt, especially in 2023. We would have ran through Troy that year. So this is a chance for us to get redemption for those two teams, to claim a title and really show that JMU's cream of the crop in the Sun Belt. And it's your last chance to make a statement. Obviously, with North Texas being ranked ahead of us, it eliminates the chance of us being in over the American champ. But you want to make a statement here to make sure that if you do win and Duke wins, there's no funny business going on in the back end. Score and score by the plentiful here. And to do that, they really need to lean on this ground game. JMU has one of the best rushing attacks led by Wayne Knight and AB3 and that stable of other JMU backs like George Pettaway against this 101st ranked rushing defense for Troy. They're letting up almost 190 yards per game. JMU needs to pound the rock, make Troy feel this cold weather with each and every hit. And most importantly, have fun and play loose. This could be the last game that these players get to play together as a group if they don't make the playoff. More than likely, people will be transferring before any potential bowl game. Have fun, man. You get to play in front of your home crowd, potentially win a conference title. Just have fun. That's the key here. Enjoy the moment. Do not think of anything else but the next play.
These are going to be some highly entertaining games on Friday, and that's just started off. I mean, the games that we're going to be going into here soon with the other Friday games and then the Saturday games as well, but big chance for both of our teams here to really make a statement and make it that much harder or more intense in the committee's room. And we'll have to see what Duke can do for the Dukes. But moving on here to the other conference championship games here. We are covering them all. We have Kennesaw State going to Jax State on Friday at 6 p.m. This is Kennesaw State's second year in the FBS, Jax State's third. Jax State is here a year after Rich Rod had left and went back to WVU. So pretty interesting from both sides, but I know Will is going to be a big Kennesaw State fan this week because he would love to see them win and get them just ranked higher. So this will be a good one to see.
It's going to be a really good game, I think, for the CUSA here. I want to be looking at Kennesaw's QB Amaria Odom and Jax State's running back Cam Cook. Cam Cook has been lighting it up on the ground this year, and Amaria Odom has been really good for the Owls through the air. These are going to be the key players to watch out for here in a showdown that I think, might not have the most eyes on it on Friday night, but it should be a game that if you love college football, you should be watching it because it's going to be a fun contest.
It's going to be a great one, but with all this said, who are you picking?
You know, I'll ride with Will, and I will go with Kennesaw State here. I'm gonna ride with them here. They've looked impressive throughout the course of the season. I think it's going to be a really close game, though. But I trust Amari Odom here a little bit more than the Jack State defense.
Like where your head's at. I think I'm going to go with you here. These two did play earlier in the season at Jack State, and Jack State did win 35-26. But I think Kennesaw is going to take it, get that quality lesson, and learn from it, and they're just going to come out, play like a different team, and get it done and win the conference.
It's hard to beat a team twice in a season.
Very hard.
And speaking of looking at teams that are going to be playing again, you know, UNLV is traveling to Boise State Friday night as well for the Mountain West, a rematch from last year's conference championship. It's a little interesting. UNLV is 10-2, Boise State's 8-4. But Boise gets to host because of the Mountain West computers had to decide between a four-way tie between these two, New Mexico and San Diego State. Ultimately, Boise State got the nod to host. UNLV was second. So we get a rematch from 2024. And like we talked about, UNLV has a slight chance to make the playoff. Boise does as well. Theirs even slimmer, but never say never.
You can never say never in this sport. I mean, with how things are going so far and the possibility of a massive wrench being thrown in with Duke winning could give UNLV that slight chance. And it's going to be a fun one to watch here. Got to look for UNLV quarterback Anthony Calandria, the UVA transfer. He's been balling out this season for UNLV with 22 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, over 3,000 passing yards. He look for him to try and have that solid game. It's being in Boise is going to be tough. That's why I think Boise is going to rely on their running game here with Dylan Riley and their quarterback Maddox Madison. Right? Am I saying that right?
Yes.
I might be wrong. I always want to say it's Madison Maddox, but close enough. Either way. But Maddox Madison, he can do some stuff with his legs. So can Calandria, but look for Boise to make it, like you had said where you want with JMU to do to Troy, make them feel that weather. It's going to be cold. It's probably going to be weather, like, you know, who knows what sort of weather they'll get there. Could be snow, could be sleet, could be rain, whatever it is. But it's going to be a grueling game, and it's going to be a fun one to watch yet again.
You know, earlier this season, Boise really laid the wood to UNLV, though, 56-31. So UNLV is definitely going to be licking their chops for a little bit of payback. They're on a 3-game skid against Boise State. So who do you got?
I think I'm going to have to go with the Broncos here at home. I think that they've had their slip-ups this season. I know they were missing Maddox for a little bit this season as well. So I think that this is their chance to just be like, you know what, we should have been in this conversation, but it's our own fault. But they get it done here at home.
I am going to have to agree with you. This was a really tough one for me, and ultimately I got to go with Boise because of the home field advantage. I think that's going to really help them, and I think Boise just is going to go out to prove that the Mountain West still runs through them, and they don't need Ashton Genty to be the best team in the conference. So I'm with you on this one.
I mean, it obviously helps when you have someone like an Ashton Genty. So, but they didn't this year, and they're still in the running. So they're still a very well-built team. But moving on to our next one here, we have Miami of Ohio, not the U, traveling to Western Michigan Saturday at noon.
And I think I have this written down wrong. I believe the MAC championship is actually held at Ford Field. So this is going to be a neutral site game, and that is my apologies on our notes here. Either way, though, nothing's wrong with a little MACtion on a Saturday morning, kicking off that 12 p.m. slate. We'll get into that BYU Texas Tech game here in a second. But looking at this, these are two MAC teams that have a long history. Miami holds the series lead 39-24 with one tie. Miami won the matchup earlier this year in October, 26-17. They had a fourth quarter comeback to get that 9-point win. So I think this is going to be a really compelling matchup between two MAC schools. where it was really a conference this year where no one could get that upper edge on anyone. It was really everyone kind of jumbled together. So a chance for one team to get that crown of the best team in the MAC.
The MAC this year has been just like everyone kind of compiled in and just all over the place. There was, like you said, there was no team that really solidified themselves at the top there. But this one is, another rematch from the regular season. Like we had said before, it's going to be hard to beat a team twice. It's never easy. But, who knows? I mean, both teams can go back and look at that same film that the other team does, and they can both adjust how they seem fit. And it's going to be another one where does Miami need another fourth quarter comeback, or can Western Michigan put them away? Or maybe it's the reverse this time, where Miami finds a way to get ahead and Western Michigan needs that comeback. So yet again, another one where we see an early season, or not early season, but a regular season matchup, and does it play out the same way or does it not? We'll have to wait and see on Saturday.
And I'm curious, Tony, of who you think is going to come out on top in the MAC here.
I think I'm going to have to go with the Miami of Ohio. I think that them showing themselves in that earlier matchup with that fourth quarter comeback is going to give them enough of that oomph to get ahead there and not have to rely on a comeback. I think they realized, we saw it in the earlier game, they realized what they did wrong, fixed it, came back and won. I think this one they just don't even start off on that wrong foot. They just get going and just take it home.
I like where your head's at. I think Miami down the stretch really did show some people that they were a pretty decent team. But I'm going to go with Western Michigan on this one. I think they're going to correct the wrong that happened earlier in the season. I think they're bitter about that. They blew that game in the fourth quarter. I think they're going to make the necessary adjustments to keep the pedal on the metal here and get the job done and go home with a MAC title.
I like where your head's at. Finally have some disagreements here. But moving on to one of the biggest ones this upcoming weekend, of course, being the Big 12, BYU facing Texas Tech yet again with, another conference championship where we had a regular season matchup.
Texas Tech really did some damage to BYU earlier this season. They dominated that one 29-7, and because of that, they're opening up as a 12.5-point favorite last time I checked, which to me is crazy. These teams are not that far apart. I know the earlier season matchup says they are. I don't think they truly are. So if you're a betting person, I would definitely be looking at that spread and seeing what you can make some money off of. And like we've talked about, BYU is going to need a win to make the playoffs here. They win and they're in, lose and they're out. While Texas Tech can secure a top 4 seed and a bye, there's a small outside chance if they lose to BYU, they drop. But I really can't see them dropping from 4 to out of the playoff with a loss to BYU. But I wouldn't be surprised either. I think it would be an incredible disservice for them to drop that far if they do lose. I mean, they would have to drop behind, Alabama, Notre Dame as well. So you never know. They could, but I think they're safe as long as they don't lose badly.
I'm with you there. I think Texas Tech is one of those locked teams. They've done enough this season where they've been rewarded with it, obviously, being a top 4 team now. So we'll have to see another regular season rematch here where, like you had said, Texas Tech just really brought it to them, showed that they are the top dogs of the Big 12 this season, and their money's paying off. I know they had a huge reinvigoration with how much money was put into the program and what they used on the roster, and it's paying off very well for them where they seemed a surefire. I'm with you there. I think if BYU does find a way to win this, Texas Tech drops, but they don't drop out completely. It would be a total disservice to do that to that team where, you could argue that they could possibly be higher if they keep their starting quarterback for the full season. I mean, They were winning every game 20+, and they have one slip up and, they could have been a top 3 team, top 2 team, maybe we'll see, who knows. Yeah. But this is another one of those ones where can BYU figure out what happened and prevent it from happening? Their defense has to be stout. They have to find a way to put a cap on that Texas Tech offense that carries them through these games. But then on the flip side, you got to get the ball in the end zone. I mean, they only scored 7 points in that first one. So You know that Texas Tech is going to be scoring and scoring a lot, so you got to be able to match it. 3-and-outs aren't going to work. Giving them extra possessions are just going to make life so much harder. So be smart with the ball, be good with the ball, and put it in the end zone so you can have a chance. I mean, if Texas Tech pulls away early, then we might see another blowout here, but I'm hoping we don't.
Yeah, I think this one is the conference championship game that is the most up in the air of how people think it could go. It's really going to come down to Bear Brockenmeyer and Baron Morton, the quarterbacks for both of these stellar teams. Both have played really well this season, so I think it's going to come down to the arms and legs of both of these gentlemen. And ultimately, who do you got to take in this one?
Well, this is a rough one because it could absolutely shape the playoff and who's in, who's out sort of thing. But, I think I'm going to just have to stick with my BYU. I've picked them all season. I'm picking them again. I think they right the wrongs. Coach getting extended is going to give that team a boost. They know he's there for them, and he's going to get it done, and he wants it just as bad as they do. The Crumble Cookie CEO wants it just as bad as they do because he helped extend the man. All those churches want it done, and they get it done, and they shake up the playoff.
I think the power of the church is extremely influential, second only to Crumble Cookie. But that's not going to be enough to stop the oil money at Texas Tech. And I think the Red Raiders are going to win the rematch here, and the oil money is going to come out on top of the cookie money. I think it's going to be a lot closer than this first game ever was, though.
I hope so, because it would pain me to see it turn into another one or just a possible blowout where, it would just be like, oh, Big 12 sucks and all this stupid shit. So
yeah.
But we hope for a good game. We hope all of these are good games because it just makes it more entertaining. But one we know will be a good game here is the SEC Championship with Georgia playing Alabama. Yet again, another regular season rematch. Saturday at 4 p.m. Kind of funny that they didn't throw this one in the primetime slot, seeing as how they love to prop up the SEC. Game day being here
that 4
again.
p.m. Excuse me, that 4 p.m. slot gives them a slot to their own, though. They'll be the only game on. Yeah. So I can't wait for all the SEC chanters to be like, oh, well, we got the most television views out of all the conference championship games. Well, they're going to be the only conference championship game that's on during that time period. So, of course, people are going to watch that.
Exactly. I mean, it's just some way to find a way to prop up the SEC and make it so that they look better than everybody. But we all know it. They're stupid. We hate the SEC and they're biased. But off to no rant. Georgia and Alabama playing again. Another regular season rematch where Bama won the first one in a classic 24-21 meeting at Georgia. So this one being at neutral ground, always at Mercedes-Benz, where Georgia was just at the previous week when they played Georgia Tech. And, this is huge for Bama because, are they a lock? You could argue it. You could not argue it. So do they win this? They know they're in for a fact. Mm-hmm. Georgia's not getting knocked out if they lose this game. Very obviously, they're a top 3 team. But this is one of those ones again for Bama, like how it was last year, where could they possibly be on the outside and maybe need some help, or if they just win this, they're set, they're good to go, they know they're in. So we'll have to see, because we know how Kirby Smart is in his coaching adjustments, and we know he's a very good coach. Mm-hmm. And I know that they were all looking forward to this. I guarantee this is what all the Georgia players and coaches wanted, was a rematch so they could right that wrong. So I'm looking forward to what will probably be a very feisty game.
I agree, and not to get on any kind of crazy rant, but should Georgia lose, they will definitely be safe. But it just goes to show how crazy it is that if Texas Tech loses, there's a conversation they get eliminated, while Georgia, if they lose, they'll probably still host a game. Double standards are crazy, but Georgia's looking to maintain that by winning, and it's going to come down to Gunnar Stockton versus Ty Simpson. Who can dissect the opposing team's defense better? I got to give the edge to Ty Simpson just a little bit. I think he's a little bit better of a player. And I think he is going to outperform Gunnar Stockton on the stat sheet just a touch.
It's going to be very close between those two. They've both had very good seasons, especially Ty Simpson getting off to that really bad start in that Florida State game and then just running away. Was a Heisman favorite at one point. And you could argue if he didn't lose the Oklahoma game, he probably still is a Heisman favorite. Gunnar having a pretty sneaky season where he's not in the limelight of anything, but Georgia's a very good team and the offense is scoring and getting the job done. So it's really going to come down to the defensive side for both teams. Who can get that stop when you need it the most, who can get the offense off the field the quickest, and set yourself up for success. I think something that's probably going to go under the radar that I think could decide this game is special teams. The kick returns, punt returns, and those field goals. I mean, those can make or break games. We've seen plenty of times before where if you're not taking those points, or you're setting yourself up for that game-winning field goal, you got to put yourself in a good position. And you never want it to get like that, but sometimes that's what happens. And we could be in for a special game.
I think it is going to be a great game. These teams always have exciting matchups, so there's no doubt about that for me. And it's going to be interesting to see if Kirby Smart can do a little exorcism on his Alabama Demons, as that seems to be the only program he can't get a leg up on, even without Nick Saban.
I don't know what it is. He sees them on the schedule and gets scared. And I see dead people sort of thing. But with all this being said, who do you got coming out of the SEC?
Like I said, I think Ty Simpson's going to be the superior quarterback in this one. But that's not going to be enough. I think the Dogs are going to get this one done. I think Kirby Smart's going to have these boys chomping at the bit to get their revenge. I can only imagine what he's going to say in that locker room. I hope it leaks like it did in the national title game against TCU. And despite Ty Simpson, I think, having a better day, football is the ultimate team sport, and it takes more than just one player. And I think Georgia's going to get this one done.
I like where your head's at. Things seem to be going Georgia's way right now, and Alabama having that late stutter could hurt them a little bit. But for some reason, Alabama just seems to find a way against Georgia, but they don't this time. I think I'm going to take the Dogs with you here. I think Kirby Smart is just sick and tired of the Crimson Tide right now, and he's going to find a way to take over this game and make it seem like that it shouldn't be close. And maybe he wants to play spoiler and see, if we can beat them pretty handedly, we could knock them out of the playoff altogether. So who knows? We'll see. But give me the Dogs to win.
I think it's going to be an incredible matchup. I said earlier this season when we picked this game, I thought it came down to coaching, and I'm going to ride with that same sentiment this time. So I agree. Georgia, Kirby Smart, they get the job done. And I think this is the game that, for me, I am most interested for this weekend. Duke versus UVA, Saturday at 8 p.m. UVA won the first matchup this season, 34-17, so a little nerve-wracking to see that score, but massive, massive playoff implications. Should JMU win Friday, knock on wood, this will be the game that I'm locked into.
Absolutely. This is every JMU fan. I mean, you could argue UNLV fan. I mean, there's a lot of people that are behind Duke right now.
Every Virginia Tech fan, I'm sure, too, because they would hate to see UVA get in the playoff.
Absolutely. I mean, every college football, non-purist that doesn't suck off the SEC is probably rooting for Duke so that we can get absolute chaos in the committee. And it would be very, very, very fun to see Duke win. And I mean, I would love to see both of our teams sneak into that playoff there and just get a shot at it and, maybe do some damage. Who knows? But I'm with you where that previous score is a little scary to see. I thought that was a game earlier in the season that could have, shaken up the conference a little, with Duke kind of on its way back up to that point. But nonetheless, they couldn't get it done. UVA gets it done on the road too. But this game being in Charlotte, like always, let it be known that in that game, the UVA quarterback did throw 2 interceptions, so didn't have a solid game, but they had a great game on the ground. So I think that is going to play heavy into how this game goes. If UVA can establish that run game yet again, I think that gives them their best shot at winning this game. I know when Tulane played Duke as well, our run game was very adamant in that game as well, where they had success on the ground, and that set up the pass game, of course, play action wise and all that. So look for that yet again from UVA. But I think it's going to come down is, can Darian Mensah carry this Duke team to this title? They have gone through hell and back, it seems like, this season, and somehow found their way in the ACC title game. So let's see if they can just pull off one more thing to get it done.
I hope Darian Mensah goes absolute bananas on UVA's defense. The old Tulane quarterback. I think it's safe to say that I'm taking Duke in this one. I need it. So I am going to just come out here and say it. I'm riding with the Blue Devils. Who do you got?
You know, as much as I am thinking I really want to go Duke, but UVA just seems like they're just going to yet again pull it off. But I'm going with the Blue Devils. I got to take them. I want chaos. Give me all the chaos possible. It would just mean so much for the sport if this were to happen and just create all the possibilities of just shit changing in the playoff. So give me the Blue Devils to get it done. Create the impossible situation where we see two G5s in the playoff.
Oh, you got my neck on that one. I just had to I had already marked you down for UVA with the way that was going. And UVA does have a chance to be in a spot no one ever thought the UVA program could be in. As someone from Virginia, no one talks about UVA football. They talk about Virginia Tech football, and they talk about JMU football, and quite frankly, UVA is kind of the odd man out a lot of times. So, I have no ill will towards UVA. I'm never going to cheer for them. I do have a heated rivalry with them, but I hope them well. But I hope they absolutely explode into a bazillion pieces come Saturday night, and Duke gets the job done.
It would just create the greatest possible outcomes for everything in college football. So we can hope they get it done. I will be seated for it. But another game that is going to determine possible 1-2 seeding here is the Big Ten championship, with this year being Indiana versus Ohio State, Saturday in that primetime slot, the same time as the ACC title game. Both undefeated, 1 versus 2. It's going to be, it should be a pretty good game here.
Based off of my research, this is the 31st all-time meeting between the number 1 versus number 2 in history. Obviously, a lot of those taking place during the BCS era, where you always had the 1 versus 2 most of the time facing off. Now, you could say this is regular season, maybe it's postseason, but it is rare for 1 versus 2 to compete, let alone 1 versus 2 be undefeated. And for that reason, it's completely insane that College Game Day is not here. I know that they have the brand to go to the SEC championship game, but that's a game that's already happened. This is a game versus undefeated 12-0, 1 versus 2. And honestly, the Heisman's even on the line with Mendoza and Sayin. The winner of this game is probably going to win the Heisman, in my opinion. So I really wish that Game Day had been here. I think it would have been the right move, but they'd gone to 2 Big Ten schools in a row, so that they weren't going to go with Ohio State back-to-back for the 3rd time this year.
Yeah, it kind of sucks, especially with them going to SEC per usual. Maybe they could have thrown a wrench in there and went to the ACC title game because of the implications it had.
They
but
never would have.
They were never going to do that. We all know that. It was going to be either the Big Ten or the SEC, and they just picked the SEC because who doesn't want to see Alabama versus Georgia again? So, So great. But no, this game is absolutely absurd. I mean, this was the game last year that everyone thought was going to get Indiana out of the playoff, where they play their only, quote, legit team, and they lost. But this year, this Indiana team just looks completely different, where they seem like they are up for the challenge and just seem like that they're ready to prove that they're just completely different now, and that the program has taken 20 steps forward and just become a powerhouse under the belt, of course, of Curt Cignetti, who has just taken this team to different levels. So this one is going to be insane. It's going to be almost like a checkpoint here for Ohio State, where like they finally get a honestly their first like really good team. I mean, they played Texas week 1. Doesn't say a lot because they didn't really look that great either in Ohio State. And then they played Michigan last week, and to me, Michigan wasn't really that great of a team. Probably a little overranked on everyone's part, realistically. I never thought that, as much I took Michigan last week, but I never thought it was, honestly, I was going with my my heart there, not my head, because I just don't like Ohio State. I'm a huge Ohio State hater. I wish they would just blow up, but this is one of those ones where it's gonna I think we're gonna really see the true colors of Ohio State. This being their first massive matchup, in my opinion. But the same for Indiana, where they get that game against Oregon earlier in the season, and it was a great win on the road. But we've seen that Ohio State has that just totally complete roster. So this is their chance to show that they are just different this year.
Yeah, it really has an opportunity for Indiana to. I mean, Cignetti has already changed the trajectory of the program forever as is, but this win, a win against undefeated Ohio State for the Big Ten title, will change Indiana football forever. They'll build a statue by the end of the game for Cignetti if he wins this game. And Ohio State wants to prove that they're still cream of the crop, and Indiana is just a jumpstart program with nothing to it. I personally don't think this game's going to go like the one last year. Indiana is a much better team, a more complete team, and quite frankly, a team that has proven that they are real.
It's going to be fun to watch. I mean, if it wasn't for Duke UVA being on at the same time, I mean, I'd 100% be glued to this. I'm going to watch both regardless. But it's going to be one of those ones. I mean, how does it affect the seeding of the playoff? With them being the 1-2, do they just interchange? Does the loser possibly, if it's Indiana, with them being the 2 seed there, if they lose, do they possibly drop? If a team if Georgia wins, obviously they'll probably get propped up. Texas Tech possibly getting propped up. The seeding could change a little bit here depending on the outcome of the game, and could prevent a team like Indiana, them being the lesser team here in the rankings wise, where they're the 2, Ohio State's the 1. If they lose, they could lose that bye potentially. So we'll have to see, but I don't think it'll change too much playoff wise. These teams are obviously both locks, no matter what happens in this game. But I'm with you in the sense that the Heisman could very much be decided in this game. I'm not listening to that Diego Pavia bullshit of him winning it. I think it comes down to these 2 teams and these 2 players. Realistically, Pavia's had a great season, but these 2 have just, for me specifically, Mendoza has just done numbers this year with this team, and this isn't a super roster by any sort of means, and to have them in this position says a lot about him and the culture and the coaching there. But Sayan's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing, and that's setting the team up to success, and he's got the weapons and he's using them correctly. So it's between these 2, it's going to be a very interesting battle. I think it's going to come down to the defenses, of course, because defense always wins you championship games. So the defense, we know Ohio State's got one of the best players, if not the best player in the country, in Caleb Downs. Can he be the difference maker on the defensive side, while the Indiana unit as a whole just seems to be just such a well-oiled machine that it's very hard to break. So we're going to see which one can crack first.
It's going to be an insane game, and I got to know, are you going to ride with Indiana, or are you going to flip sides here and go with your hated enemy, Ohio State?
Fuck Ohio State. Give me Indiana. I'm taking Indiana. I can't pick OSU. I can't stand them. I think Indiana is just going to show that this is their time, and that they're here for a reason, and that they're ready to show the world that they're legit and that the Big Ten is theirs.
As much as I want to pick JMU, Midwest, Indiana, I got to go with the Buckeyes here. I was the only dummy to rank Ohio State number 1 this week over Indiana. I'm going to give the edge to Ohio State. They've been here before. They're the defending national champs. I think they're going to get it done, and I think they're a better team than they were last year, honestly. And it's going to be a very close game, though, a lot different than their matchup last year.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to all these games. It's going to be such a great weekend with all these conference championship games, with everything potentially changing playoff-wise. But let us know what you guys are looking forward to here. Which games are you looking forward to the most? What do you think is going to come out of this? What playoff implications are going to happen? What, all that kind of stuff. What coaches are going to get hired after this? Who knows? There's still plenty of openings out there, so we'll have to see. But don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok at Dynasty Dummies. Feel free to follow our personal accounts at Hunter_Shaw5 and at Crony2020. And we will see you all after this amazing weekend.
Go Dukes, baby.